Inter Milan versus AC Milan. A Champions League quarter-final between these two clubs once ended without a final whistle. The tie was settled by a committee in Switzerland. April 2005. Milan had won the first leg 2-0. Shevchenko scored again on the half hour to make it 3-0 across the two matches, and Inter were finished. Then Esteban Cambiaso put the ball in the net and had it disallowed. What came down from the stand behind Dida's goal was not one object. Plastic bottles, fireworks, flares, at one point an umbrella. Dida was clearing the debris out of his own penalty area when a flare struck him on the shoulder. He was led away for treatment. The barrage carried on without him. Marcus Merck took both teams off the pitch, waited, and abandoned the match with under 20 minutes left. The photograph that survived is not of the flares. It is Marco Materazzi, the most combative defender Inter had, resting his elbow on the shoulder of Milan's Rui Costa, the two of them standing in the middle of the pitch, watching red smoke climb into the roof of the stadium. UEFA awarded the match to Milan 3-0, 5-0 on aggregate. Inter were ordered to play 4 European matches behind closed doors and fined 300,000 Swiss francs, which UEFA's own spokesman described at the time as the largest fine the organization had ever issued. Roma versus Lazio. The Rome derby of March 2004 was abandoned because supporters believed the police had killed a child outside the stadium. No child had been killed. It was 0-0. Then something strange happened at both ends of the ground at once. Supporters began folding up their banners, and new ones went up accusing the police of murder. The rumor was that a police vehicle had run over a boy outside the ground. It was untrue, and the stadium announcer said so repeatedly over the public address system. It changed nothing. 4 minutes into the second half, 3 men climbed down out of the Roma end and walked onto the pitch. Nobody stopped them. They asked for Francesco Totti. Totti listened, then went to Fabio Capello and relayed what he had been told, that a child was dead and that if the match continued, the players would be killed. The decision to abandon it was taken by Adriano Galliani, the president of the league, over the telephone, from hundreds of miles away. What happened outside explains this rivalry better than any history lesson could. Roma and Lazio supporters, 4 of whom had been treated for stab wounds after fighting each other before kickoff, folded up their banners, walked out together, and turned on the police as a single group. More than 150 officers were injured. The 3 men who walked onto the pitch were arrested and released without charge. The derby was replayed a month later and finished 1-1. The match was not stopped by something that happened. It was stopped by something that tens of thousands of people believed had happened. Fenerbahce versus Galatasaray. Galatasaray won the Turkish league in 2012 without a single one of their own supporters in the building. The federation had barred away fans. So the only people in the stadium to watch them become champions were the 50,000 who had come to stop it. Final day, and the maths was simple. Galatasaray needed a point. Fenerbahce needed to win, and if they won, the title was theirs. They were at home, against the club they hate most, at a ground where Galatasaray had not won in 12 years. There was more riding on it than a trophy. Turkish football was in the middle of a criminal match-fixing investigation, and Fenerbahce's own chairman was in custody and on trial. Days earlier, the football authorities had cleared the clubs. The court case carried on regardless. Before kickoff, his supporters held up placards across an entire stand to build a giant picture of his face. They had come to win a championship and give it to him. It finished goalless, with a man sent off on each side. Then the real problem started. Fenerbahce supporters came over the barriers. Seats were torn out and thrown onto the pitch. Police used pepper spray to clear the stands, and tear gas in the corridor outside the dressing rooms once supporters reached it. Both squads were locked in. Journalists could not leave the press room. Nobody could work out how to hand over the trophy. It took 3.5 hours. According to Turkish reporting at the time, it happened in the end because the Prime Minister telephoned the governor of Istanbul and told him to get it done. Even then, the floodlights were off. The champions of Turkey collected the cup in the dark, lit by the lamps on reporters' cameras. Galatasaray had the championship. What they didn't have was a way out of the building. West Ham United versus Millwall. Outside West Ham's ground stands a 4-ton bronze of the only England side ever to win the World Cup. 3 of the 4 men on it were West Ham players. The club paid for it. Before this match, they boarded it up. The players arrived to find the streets around the stadium boarded up as well. One of them said it looked like a place expecting a hurricane. What the city was bracing for was a second-round League Cup tie, a Premier League club against a third Division 1. 2 clubs from the same few miles of East London, drawn together for the first time ever in that competition. No trophy in it, no league position, nothing. August 2009. The police cut Millwall's ticket allocation from 3,000 to 1,500. Millwall told them in advance that this would make trouble more likely rather than less. Millwall led through Neil Harris. With 3 minutes of normal time left, Junior Stanislas equalised and West Ham supporters came onto the pitch. The players had to walk over and ask them to go back. In extra time, Stanislas scored a penalty and they came on again. This time, the Millwall players turned and left for the dressing room. Zavon Hines eventually made it 3-1. Outside, a 44-year-old Millwall supporter was stabbed in the chest on a residential street. He survived. Nobody was ever charged for it. 200 riot police and 20 officers on horseback worked the ground that night. 80 people were arrested in the investigation that followed. West Ham were fined £115,000 and banned more than 50 people from the stadium for life. Millwall were cleared. If you have heard of this rivalry at all, it is probably from a film. Green Street and The Firm both built their stories on these 2 sets of supporters. England was bidding to host the 2018 World Cup at the time, and there was immediate concern that one night in East London had damaged their chances. Real Madrid versus Barcelona. This one does not end with supporters, it ends with a manager. In 2011, Real Madrid and Barcelona played each other 4 times in 18 days. The league, the Copa del Rey final, and both legs of the Champions League semi-final. 7 goals, 5 red cards. Jose Mourinho gave a press conference consisting largely of one word, asked over and over. Why? Why Barcelona got the decisions? Why his defender was sent off? Barcelona's president warned publicly that there would be blood on the streets if it carried on. Then they had to play twice more in August for the Spanish Super Cup. Second leg, Camp Nou. 2-2 from the first match. Messi scored the winner in the 88th minute. In the closing moments, Marcelo went through Cesc Fabregas. Both benches emptied onto the pitch, and in the middle of it, Jose Mourinho worked his way around the back of the crowd, reached forward, and put his finger in the eye of Tito Vilanova, Pep Guardiola's assistant. Vilanova pushed his arm away. A Barcelona official standing directly behind them, watching the whole thing with no expression whatsoever, became internationally famous for it. Mourinho was banned for 2 matches, Vilanova for 1, for retaliating. Mourinho refused to apologize. Years afterwards, he reversed himself completely. He said the fault was entirely his, that the image would follow him forever, and that he had been a victim of himself. Celtic versus Rangers. 70,000 people went to the 1980 Scottish Cup final. There were roughly 12 police officers inside the ground. Everyone else had been posted outside, because outside was where the trouble was expected. Celtic beat Rangers 1-0 after extra time, George McCluskey scoring. The Scottish FA had given both teams permission to parade the trophy on the pitch afterwards. Reasonable enough, since Hampden had just been fitted with a 10-foot perimeter fence. Celtic's players went over to their own supporters. Some of those supporters climbed the fence. Rangers supporters came over at the far end. Within minutes there were bottles, cans, bricks and lengths of wood torn out of the terracing being used at both ends. 12 officers could do nothing at all. Order was restored only when mounted police were sent in and cleared the pitch by riding through it. Archie Macpherson, commentating live for the BBC, told the country it looked like a scene from Apocalypse Now. 210 people were arrested. Both clubs were fined £20,000. The old firm divide is usually explained through religion and national identity, and it has never mapped neatly onto individual supporters. What is not in dispute is the consequence. Parliament passed the Criminal Justice Scotland Act, and the general sale of alcohol was banned at Scottish football grounds from that August. 46 years later, it is still banned. One cup final did that.
Boca Juniors versus River Plate. South America's biggest club final was played in Spain. 2018. Boca against River in the final of the Copa Libertadores. The first time the two Buenos Aires giants had ever met at that stage, and the last two-legged final before the format changed. The first leg at Boca's ground finished 2-2. The second was at River's Monumental. Away supporters were banned from both. The Boca team bus was attacked on its approach to the stadium. Windows were smashed, including the driver's. Police fired tear gas to clear the crowd, and it came in through the broken glass. Players were cut. The captain, Pablo Perez, finished the night wearing an eye patch and later needed surgery on it. Kickoff was pushed back, then moved to the following day, then postponed indefinitely. Perez said afterwards that he could not play on a pitch where he thought he might die. Attempts to reschedule inside Argentina collapsed, not least because the G20 summit was arriving in Buenos Aires that same week. CONMEBOL moved the match to the Santiago Bernabéu in Madrid, 10,000 kilometers away, and the first final in the competition's 58-year history staged outside South America. Then came the part nobody had planned. In Madrid, both sets of supporters were allowed in together. The match neither club could safely host at home was played in front of a mixed crowd in Spain. River won 3-1 in extra time. The fixture that was supposed to settle who owns Buenos Aires was settled in another hemisphere. Dynamo Zagreb versus Red Star Belgrade. Outside Dynamo Zagreb Stadium, there is a memorial to supporters for whom, the inscription says, the war began on the 13th of May 1990. That is the date of a football match that produced no goals. Yugoslavia was still one country in May 1990 and was rapidly ceasing to behave like one. Croatia had held its first multi-party elections weeks earlier, and parties favouring independence had won. Red Star supporters travelled up from Belgrade for a league match at Maksimir. They started breaking through the segregation fencing hours before kickoff and got into the main stand, which is where families sat. Dynamo supporters came the other way. Police used batons and tear gas. Seats were torn out of the terracing. Both groups ended up on the pitch, and the fixture was abandoned. Most accounts say it never kicked off at all. Dynamo's captain, a 21-year-old named Zvonimir Boban, stayed out on the field. He saw a police officer striking a Dynamo supporter who was already on the ground. He ran over and kicked the officer. It was filmed. In Croatia, that image became a symbol of resistance to Yugoslav authority, and Boban became a national figure because of it. The Yugoslav Federation banned him for 6 months, which cost him the 1990 World Cup. Now the correction, because it matters. The riot did not start the war. Croatia's war began the following year. The country was already coming apart. The stadium reflected that rather than caused it. What the afternoon did do was show, on camera, how far things had already gone. 3 weeks later, Yugoslavia played a friendly at that same stadium, and the home crowd booed their own national anthem and cheered for the Netherlands. Most football riots end up as an embarrassing chapter in a rivalry's history. Maximir became something else, an image people reached for afterwards to explain what their country had already become. The match never produced a goal. It is remembered as a warning,